this team, the youngest member of the bowling attack is Josh Hazlewood at age 34. Has that ever happened in history?
George Bailey's going to have to make some tough calls, and I think in the past he's shown that he hasn't really had the appetite for that at times.
I do think that on this particular one, Steve Waugh's gone a bit hard. I think this idea that George Bailey and his panel haven't made tough calls is frankly a bit ridiculous.
If England lose the first test, I don't think they can win the series. But if they win in Perth, Australia might then be pressured to make some big decisions.
There's an open door here for England. It's a good team. It's not a great team.
Welcome back to the Code Cricket Show, and we finally have an Australian Test squad for the first match of the Ashes. I'm joined here in studio by Ben Horn, down the line by Dan Cherney, and Crash Craddock will be making an appearance a little bit later. But let's go through this Australian Test squad. There's a few surprises in there. Steve Smith, of course, is captain, but the other names: Sean Abbott, Scott Boland, Alex Carey, Brendan Doggett, Cameron Green, Josh Hazlewood, Travis Head, Josh Inglis, Usman Khawaja, Marnus Labuschagne, Nathan Lyon, Mitchell Starc, Jake Weatherald and Bo Webster. Dan, straight to you. What do you make of this squad and what the selectors have done?
There are no huge surprises here. This has been forecast a long way out. I mean, you really go back to the end of the West Indies series back in July, and they pretty much guaranteed everyone their spots, with the exception of Sam Konstas. And they started this big bat off, and he obviously didn't do enough to keep his spot. He's missed out, and Jake Weatherald, they've rewarded first-class runs, and ditto with Marnus Labuschagne. And it's probably a mark of how well Labuschagne's done that it was barely even newsworthy that he was in this squad. Everyone knew he was going to be there. It's just a matter of whether he was going to be opening or at 3. But the big question here is whether it's going to be Cam Green will be in, and it's just whether it's Bo Webster or Jake Weatherald. If Green is right to bowl, and it feels at the moment like he will be, George Bailey, the chairman of selectors, has suggested as much, then I suspect it's going to be Bo Webster slipping out of the side. Cam Green will drop down to number 6. Marnus Labuschagne will bat in his preferred number 3, and Jake Weatherald will make his test debut. If Green can't get through, I still think they'll pick him as a specialist batter, in which case Labuschagne probably opens and Webster keeps his spot at number 6. But I just don't think that they would have picked both Webster and Josh Inglis in this squad, if and Weatherald as well, if they were planning on playing 2 all-rounders as their first choice. I don't think that's the idea. I think they want to play a specialist opener. They want to have Labuschagne at 3, and it's just a matter of making sure that they have enough bowling cover, all-round cover in the form of Cam Green.
That feels like a pretty big way to go, that Cam Green is almost in the 11 regardless from the way you see it. Why do you think that is? Or has he done enough from that tour of the West Indies, a bit of his early season Sheffield Shield form, to be in that top 6 batters regardless of whether he can bowl or not?
Look, I know there are some differing views. Crush had an interesting piece with Alan Border, who said that no, he hadn't done enough to demand his spot as a specialist batsman, and that he really needed to be bowling as well. So I think that the biggest point I'd make with Cameron Green more than anything, I know his Sheffield Shield numbers of late, thus far this season, are nothing to write home about, but his Shield record overall is outstanding. And they keep on talking about rewarding Shield form. Well, when he's gone back for the most part, he's been well ahead of others.
Now, before the next topic, we have to talk about Code Sports, our new special subscription offer for 12 months, $49. That's all your deep dives, behind-the-scenes analysis. You can't get it anywhere else. And Benny, most people are spending that much money on subscriptions for TV shows for 1 month.
Absolutely, yeah. Instead of scrolling through Netflix for an hour, you can learn something about sport.
12 months of content instead of just 12 episodes. The link is in the description. Make sure to sign up now. Benny, I want to get to your predicted 11 soon, and I think it's great because we all have different 11s. But for the last fortnight, we've been saying that opening potential position is between Jake Weatherald and Matt Renshaw. Weatherald has won out, I guess, the first step to get in this squad. What do you make of that selection, and why do you kind of think the selectors went that way?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think that Jake Weatherald had been in mind for a long time, and just to Dan's point, I think the selectors have been very consistent with that. Weatherald was the top run scorer for the last Shield season. He's done very well for Australia A. He's had at least a solid start to this season, 90 and 250s. So, it's not like he's just been picked on his last couple of performances. He's done the job. I mean, I was sort of on guard a little bit for a wild card in Mitchell Marsh. because the selectors like the cut of his jib, and I think he's a chance for midway through the series if this first plan they've gone with doesn't work, or if England are on top. Don't rule Mitchell Marsh out for later in the series.
Dan, let's go to your predicted 11 to start with. It feels like you're still not quite sure who's going to be opening the batting, whether it's going to be Marnus or Weatherald. Which way are you going?
Look, I can certainly see it both ways. Right now, I've gone with Marnus just because I'm just not sure Cameron Green's going to get through. I just don't have that much faith in Cameron Green's body. And I suppose with Weatherald, while I think he has earned it, he hasn't absolutely banged the door down to start this Shield season. Which makes me just keep the door ajar, and I suppose just in front for Labuschagne to open, even though I know that's not the selector's absolutely preferred option. And I suppose the more I think about it, I think it's not going to take a hell of a lot from Cam Green to get bowling wise for him to make sure of it, and then that will be very hard for Bo Webbs to keep his spot.
Benny, you've gone Weatherald in for now.
I have, but it is a huge risk to. When you consider Pat Cummins is out injured for at least the first test, not even sure if he'd be back for the second test. It could be the third test. That's the best case scenario for Pat Cummins. So then if you go into the first test with Cameron Green as the only all-rounder, if you had a scenario where one of Australia's fast bowlers, say Josh Hazlewood, as it happened to him last season, if he had an injury in the first test, suddenly there's a huge load on your other bowlers and the all-rounder. And, that's the worst case scenario for Australia, that you start off the summer, not only is Pat Cummins injured, but maybe there's one or two other bowlers who can't back up from Perth either. So that's got to be in the selectors' minds. I mean, George Bailey today sort of played down that thought that plaguing them. He doesn't think the Cummins injury is related to the debate about whether to play one or two all-rounders. But I think that's the big issue. They have to be comfortable with what Cameron Green can bowl, because in a worst case scenario he might be called on to do a lot more.
For what it's worth, it looks like I'm keeping my options open to live in Tasmania, because I'm going both Weatherald and Webster in. I just think that at the moment, if you're picking a team for this test, Cam Green needs to bowl the 10-15 overs in this next Shield game in an innings. He hasn't done that yet, so for me, I don't think you can pick him. So I think that's the interesting perspective about where he kind of sits in terms of that batting order. But Dan, we've had our selectors' hats on. The selectors have been under the pump a little bit today from Steve Waugh.
George Bailey's going to have to make some tough calls, and I think in the past he's shown that he hasn't really had the appetite for that at times.
He had a bit of a crack at them in terms of not being able to make the tough decisions, which I think's a little bit unfair, and I think you agree.
I do think that on this particular one, Steve Waugh's gone a bit hard. I think this idea that George Bailey and his panel haven't made tough calls is frankly a bit ridiculous. I mean, you only have to look back to Australia, literally the most recent test they played in Jamaica. Nathan Lyon, who had played, other than being injured in the 23 Ashes, had played more than 100 tests straight, hadn't been dropped for 12 years, and they dropped him for effectively a dead rubber where there was no real selection pressure on. He'd been performing fine, and they dropped him for Scott Boland, which obviously worked out in the end, but they've dropped him for his best mate, Mitchell Starc's 100th test. So it was, that's a tough call. I know, it may have been off Broadway, but you drop Nathan Lyon. That's a tough call. They dropped Mitchell Starc. Speaking of Starc, dropped him twice at T20 World Cups, and he's one of the all-time great white ball bowlers Australia's ever had. So I think most of this is based around David Warner, really, if I'm being frank. You go back, people think, they indulged David Warner for too long. And look, I was one at the time who thought, maybe they had been, and there certainly was an argument to suggest as much. But David Warner was very good in his last series against Pakistan, made a century in Perth, did well in that final test at the SCG as well. And really, if you look at how openers have gone since then, and also in terms of how some of the potential replacements have gone since then, Cameron Bancroft was the one who was being talked up at the time. He has hardly set the world on fire at Sheffield Shield level since then. And Jake Fraser-McGurk, from a white ball perspective, 2020 perspective, at the 2024 T20 World Cup, when there was pressure on them to particularly pick the Rooster ahead of Warner for that tournament. Well, the Rooster has hardly, set the world on fire since then, but far from it. You can criticise selectors for many things, but I don't think not having the guts to make some tough calls is one of them.
Well, we're going to leave Dan there and cross straight to Crash Craddock, who is at the Gabba. Crash, 15-man squad, few surprises, few potentially not surprises. What do you make of the team?
I think the bigger the team, the more uncertain you are, the bigger the squad, and 15 says a lot about that, I reckon. The toughest decisions are yet to be made. Let's be frank. Weatherald to open or not to open, Green to bat 3 or 6, and Webster to play at all. So, but it's an interesting team. That the first thing I thought of was there was tremendous drama and secrecy about it. And when it sort of came, I've just done a piece saying, like, it didn't shock us at all, did it? Like, I couldn't imagine in Perth, Jofra Archer or Wood or any of the quicks sort of falling off their chair thinking, oh my goodness, look what's coming. But it's a solid team, but not what I'd call intimidating.
Crash, we heard from Stuart Broad a couple of weeks ago now that this is the worst Aussie team since 2010, 2011. Now we're actually seeing it on paper for the first test. I feel like that's a bit far off from Broady, but where do you kind of think that analysis sits?
Oh, not too far off, because we've had some really good teams between them. Sure, a couple of years after 2010 to 11, there was a weak Australian team, but not many. This team, the youngest member of the bowling attack is Josh Hazlewood at age 34. You know, like that's has that ever happened in history? I don't know. Australia's youngest bowler was 34. So they, bowlers can grow old very quickly. So there's enormous incentive for England to get rolling and score a total of 380, 390 in the first test. Keep the bowlers out there, make them work. But so there's an open door here for England. There really is. It's a good team. Yep, Australia, 100%. It's not a great team.
What's your 11 from the squad at the moment, Crash? How is it looking?
I've got Weatherall opening. I think they've got to take that leap, because Labuschagne's been killing him at number 3. Just leave him there. Just let him play at 3. Put a buffer in front of him. He doesn't want to open. And then Green at 6. Now, Green's my watch for the series because I think he's got to go from a boy to a man this series. And I think he really has to, he's been floating around the team for a lot of years now. And I think now he's needs to become a leader of the team and really step up.
We've seen Green become that leader, especially when he's fielding in that gully position. Nothing gets past him. But what does he need to do to go from that boy to a man? Is it about making sure he's balancing his bowling? Is it big innings, getting those 50s, turning them into centuries? What does he need to do?
Yeah, well, his batting average is in the mid-30s. He's better than that, winning test matches, dominating, and he's good enough to do it. I mean, his Sheffield Shield average has been floating around 50 for quite a few years now. Like, he's very, very good. But his stats say he's not indispensable either. Like, it's a big decision to drop Webster. He is a useful cricketer. So, having gone with Green, and they will go with Green, I think you want a bit more from him. And I know he missed last season with a back injury, but it was a time of great contemplation for him. So, when he started in the team, he was a little bit uncertain. It was COVID. He couldn't see his family. There was no West Australian player in it. And he was 6 years younger than the next youngest player. So, it took him a while to get used to it, but I think he's ready to step up now.
Benny, one man we have to talk about who isn't in the squad, and of course George Bailey summed it up nicely today saying if he farts it's a headline. It is Sam Konstas. Barely 20, dropped twice in 12 months from this Aussie Test team. We spoke before with Dan about selectors making those tough calls. Where do you think the responsibility lies, the fact that we are still talking about Constas? Yes, he burst onto the scene, that epic 60 on Boxing Day. He rattled Virat Kohli so much that he had to drop that shoulder into him. Where do we sit with Sam Konstas now?
Yeah, well, look, I understand what George was saying in so much as, there has been a lot of scrutiny on Sam Konstas, and it can't be easy for a guy who's 19, 20 years of age. But the reality of the situation is that he was put into, the biggest stage, the MCG on Boxing Day in front of 100,000 people, and produced probably one of the most talked about amazing innings that anyone has ever seen. So, he's instantly become this talking point, which has been great for cricket. Like, it's brought in a new audience of people. Everyone was talking about Sam Konstas. People were going up to him on the street who had no interest in cricket and suddenly did because of Sam. And, look, the selectors, maybe unwittingly, but, they're the ones who put him in there as a 19-year-old on that stage. They also then dropped him 2 tests later, even though He's just won a series for Australia in his first outing. He's missed the World Test Championship. Then he's brought back again for the West Indies in really treacherous conditions that all the batsmen struggled in, and now he's dropped again. So, I mean, the selectors, I think, have made the right decision in terms of I think he probably does need some time back in Sheffield Shield cricket to learn his game and just find that confidence again. But, they certainly haven't given him a rails run. Like, the sort of decisions that have been made through the year have contributed to this, to this roller coaster ride for Sam. So, yeah, I agree. There's a lot of scrutiny on him. There's a lot of pressure. I think Cricket Australia were making him one of their sort of, he was one of the faces of the game during the year, and you can't blame them. What a marketable guy he is. But I suppose they're all the things that he's going to have to deal with, and I think some time out of the spotlight is going to be good for him.
Crash, at the other end of the spectrum, there's been a bit of talk about Usman Khawaja. Obviously, we know he's pulled up a little bit sore so around this sort of next Shield game, but he's at the other end compared to Sam Konstas. He's coming towards the end of his career. Yes, he's someone who really wants to fight for his spot, considering he feels as though he missed a lot of years being in this Australian Test team. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that we end this Ashes series with Constas back in the team and Khawaja out of it if things go badly. But where do you see Usman Khawaja this series and how he's kind of shaping up?
Well, I like where his head is, Lockie. I really do. Do you know, at the Gabba the other day, like, he batted so much more than Renshaw. Good strike rate this season. It's up in the 60s. Like, he to me looks the most relaxed player in the team. He's always had that languid way about him, hasn't he? But here's a tip. I wouldn't be surprised if he played on beyond this season. We're all saying he's going to retire at Sydney. But, he, as you say, he missed so much, he might just continue. And if he averages 40... they've got to decide in March whether to give him another contract. So why would he retire? So I like where his game is at the moment. He looked good in the Shield game against the Blues, but more than that, it was his chatter, the press conferences. Like, I sort of wound him up a bit by saying, "Do you think Marnus should bowl himself more?" And just trying to stir him up, see. And then he said, "Marnus bowls himself too much." And off he went, you know what I mean, on this colourful sort of little tirade. And he's enjoying the game in every part of it. And that's good. And the same as Labuschagne. Like, when he finished the game the other day, he was asked whether he'd do a press conference. And now we'll have a shower. And he said, "Let's do it now. I'll get some curly ones. This will be fun." Like, he's running towards the fire, Lockie. He's up for the contest. Throw anything at Marnus, and he's just ready for it this summer. I just like where his head is, and the same with Khawaja.
We're talking about Bazball at the start of the summer. Maybe it's Uzball by the end of the summer we're talking about if Crash's prediction goes right. But I think we could also spend a whole podcast just talking about Marnus bowling himself too much. He opened in that second innings with the new ball. I think that's a little bit of a step too far. But what is next for the Australian Test bowling stocks? I mean, how do you see it playing out this series if, I guess, worst case scenario, like you said, England are consistently getting those 380 plus scores and batting the Aussie bowlers into the ground?
Well, the end can come quickly, Lockie. Like, I we should be okay because a fresh Cummins could answer all queries, couldn't he, by Test 3, 4. But beyond that, this team, I don't see a lot. I mean, Michael needs to steady, Doggett's steady and improving, and Sean Abbott, for some reason, I don't think will play a Test this series. But beyond that, there's not much at all. So, like, it's England love playing the short game, the Bazball game. My goodness me! If Joe Root gets a start and a century, he should just bat and really try and put overs into the legs of the Australian quicks. So it's a fascinating series because I still can't see how you can toss up Mark Wood, who hasn't played since February 26, if you don't mind. Hasn't played the game. Like, how could he stand up for more than one or two tests? But my great friends in England, John Etheridge, formerly from the Sun, said that, there is history of Wood going in totally fresh after a long break and going bang. So if he's that good, maybe, but I'll ask him to see it. It'll be interesting.
Let's put you on the spot, Crash. I want a prediction for the first test now that we've seen both squads. Who's winning over in Perth?
I've got Australia because I just don't like England one warm-up game, then Perth. The bounce, it's too much of an adjustment, Lockie. And you can have all your theories. I know Bazball, they've had something like 5 tours where they've played no games and just little warm-ups, and they won the first test each time. McCullum's done that well, but Perth's different. I just got Australia winning that test, and probably the series 3-2.
The cauldron of Optus Stadium, Benny, is it going to be too hot for the Poms?
I think so. I think I agree with what Crash is saying, but I think it is England's best opportunity. And if you can get Mark Wood and Jofra Archer, who are just able to hit the mark straight away, then I think they do have a good look at it. I mean, you look at Australia last summer; they lost in Perth. It is a place that Australia has lost a few tests now. If you go back over the last 10 years, South Africa I think's beaten them there once or twice. So yeah, look, I think Australia. They'll certainly be relieved, I think, that Marnus Labuschagne has hit the form that he has. And as Crash said, Usman Khawaja has started the summer well. Steve Smith has come in and made 100. So the pieces are starting to fall together for Australia. There's 14 of the 15 players in that squad who are playing a Shield game this week. So they will be sort of cherry ripe, I guess, or at least they're hoping for that first test. But look, I think if England lose the first test, I don't think they can win the series. But if they win in Perth, then I think it's really on for young and old, because Australia might then be pressured to make some big decisions in the selection room.
And just quickly, Crash mentioned a fresh and fit Pat Cummins. You and I both saw him bowling out at Cricket Central, looking pretty good in terms of stepping up that progress from last week. And you're hearing that things are behind the scenes. There's a bit of optimism.
There is, yeah. I think that, compared to where he was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think, people are very surprised in some ways at how much Pat Cummins has come along, and there is optimism. I still think the second test is too soon. I'll be surprised if he's playing in Brisbane. I think the third test is the more likely, and also probably the smarter option for Australia as well, because of the gap between the first 3 tests. They can actually give him another 2 weeks of bowling if they wait until the third test. So I think that's the smart decision. If Australia lost the first test, or if one of their 3 starting quicks went down in Perth, that's obviously going to increase the pressure on them to perhaps bring Cummins back early. So that will be interesting. But, I'm thinking third test.
If Steve Waugh said no brave calls are going to be made, it looks like we might be making some this series. Crash, how are you handling Pat Cummins? Are you rushing him back? Are you giving him all the time? What's the big call on the Aussie skipper?
Maybe test 3 and test 5. I don't think he should be playing 2 tests in a row, but I quite enjoyed Steve Waugh saying that today.
Because it is a time of transition. The bowlers are in their sort of 30s, and some of the batsmen are getting on as well. But that's natural for every team. But you just want to make sure that that 3 or 4 players don't go out at the same time. That leaves a big hole in the team. So they've got to, just make sure that it is a transition, but not all at once.
And that it's coming. These big decisions are coming. I mean, and they could be coming sooner than Australia thinks. It's end of an era can be an awkward time. I remember when McGrath and Warne and Langer retired. It took Australia 5 years to really feel good again. And when Lilly and Marsh and Chappell retired together in 1984, Australia didn't win a series for 4 years. So it's a delicate operation, and the talent behind them's not huge, just behind the test team. So I reckon if you had to, we've got 20 tests coming up in 14 months from next August, and if you said now, Lockie, name me a team for test 20 of that, all right, there's a chance that you and I might not get one right. Seriously.
Lloyd Pope. That's all I want. I want Lloyd Pope to get a test. Thank you for joining us for this week's Code Cricket episode. Stay tuned to Code Sports for all your content over the next fortnight ahead of the first Ashes test.